There are moments in life when the pain doesn't come from the storm, it comes from the people who were supposed to shelter you from it. You trusted them, leaned on them, believed in them, and somewhere between love and loyalty, something broke. But hear me today, what broke you did not bury you. What wounded you did not finish you. God specializes in reconstruction projects that look impossible to human eyes. When people walk away leaving ruins, God steps in with blueprints. When someone breaks you in pieces, God never panics. He rebuilds with purpose, power, and precision. This is not the end of your story. It is the moment God takes the shattered parts and shows you what resurrection really looks like. There are moments in life when the pain doesn't come from the storm. It comes from the people who are supposed to shelter you from it. You trusted them, leaned on them, believed in them, and somewhere between love and loyalty, something broke. But hear me today, what broke you did not bury you. What wounded you did not finish you. God specializes in reconstruction projects that look impossible to human eyes. When people walk away leaving ruins, God steps in with blueprints. When someone breaks you in pieces, God never panics. He rebuilds with purpose, power, and precision. This is not the end of your story. It is the moment God takes the shattered parts and shows you what resurrection really looks like. When God begins to rebuild you, He rarely does it on a stage. He does it in the quiet places where nobody is clapping, nobody is posting, and nobody even knows you're still standing. Because if God rebuilt you in public first, you would depend on applause instead of anointing. So He takes you into hiding. He pulls you away from the crowd, away from the relationship, away from the familiar, and you think you've been abandoned when in fact you've been selected. The silence is not rejection, it is reconstruction. God is not ignoring you. He is working on you where distractions cannot interrupt the process. When someone breaks you, they usually break your trust, your confidence, and your sense of worth. And God knows that if He put you back in front of people too soon, you would perform healed while still bleeding inside. So He rebuilds you in private where you can be honest about how hurt you really are. In the secret place, you don't have to pretend you're strong. In the secret place, you can cry without explaining yourself. In the secret place, God starts touching areas nobody else ever saw but the person who broke you. He goes deeper than the surface damage and starts addressing the fractures in your soul. God rebuilds you in secret because secret work produces public strength. The enemy saw you when you were broken, but he does not get access to the rebuilding process. People may have watched you fall apart, but they will not understand how you came back together. They will say you changed, not realizing you were reformed. They will say you're different, not knowing you were redesigned. Because when God rebuilds you, He doesn't just patch you up, He reinforces you. He strengthens your boundaries, sharpens your discernment, and deepens your dependence on Him. In the secret place, God teaches you how to stand without leaning on who hurt you. He shows you how to breathe without their validation. He teaches your heart how to lead again without needing their approval. And it is uncomfortable, because growth always stretches what was used to comfort. But this is where God replaces emotional crutches with spiritual muscle. This is where He teaches you that what you lost was never your source, it was only a resource. You wonder why God hasn't restored you yet, why the doors haven't opened, why the visibility hasn't returned, but you don't build a house by decorating it first. You strengthen the foundation before you showcase the structure. God is making sure that the next time you stand in front of people, you won't collapse under pressure. He is making sure that the next time you love, you won't lose yourself. He is making sure that when you rise whole. The secret season is where God reintroduces you to yourself. Not the version shaped by trauma, not the version shaped by abandonment, not the version shaped by betrayal, but the version shaped by His hands. And when God finishes rebuilding you in private, public restoration becomes inevitable. Because what God builds in secret cannot be destroyed by public opinion, and what God heals in private cannot be broken by human hands again. When something breaks you, it does more than cause pain. It reveals places you didn't know were vulnerable. You thought you were strong there. You thought you were healed there. You thought you were over that. But the breaking exposed cracks that were hidden beneath your smile, beneath your strength, beneath your ability to keep going. And God allows the exposure not to shame you, but to heal you. because what stays covered stays untreated, and what stays untreated keeps bleeding into places it doesn't belong. The pain didn't come to destroy you, it came to diagnose you. It revealed wounds that were buried under productivity, wounds that were masked by success, wounds that were quiet until pressure touched them. You didn't know abandonment still lived there until someone walked away. You didn't know rejection still had a voice until someone stopped choosing you. You didn't know fear was still driving until security was removed. The breaking pulled the curtain back, and suddenly you could see what God had been trying to reach all along. God does not heal what you hide, and He does not fix what you deny. So sometimes He allows life to press on you until what's inside you comes out. Not because He enjoys your pain, but because He values your wholeness. The exposure was necessary. If it hadn't broken, you would have kept building on top of pain, calling it strength. You would have kept functioning instead of healing. You would have kept surviving instead of being restored. What broke you showed you patterns you kept repeating. It showed you why you tolerated what you should have confronted. It showed you why you stayed too long, gave too much, and settled for less than you deserved. It showed you where your boundaries were weak and where your identity was tied to being needed instead of being valued. And God says, now that you can see it, I can heal it. Healing begins with honesty. And the breaking stripped away the lies you told yourself. You can't say you're fine when you're shattered. You can't say you're healed when you're triggered. You can't say you're over it when it still controls your reactions. The breaking forced you to stop pretending. And in that raw place, God stepped in, not with judgment, but with grace. God heals layer by layer. He doesn't rush the process because rushed healing creates fragile faith. So He takes you back to moments you avoided, conversations you buried, emotions you suppressed, not to reopen the wound, but to clean it. Infection grows where pain is ignored, and God loves you too much to let you move forward infected by your past. The breaking also revealed how much you relied on people instead of God. It showed you where your peace was outsourced. It showed you where your joy was conditional. It showed you where your worth was placed in someone else's hands. And when those hands dropped you, God said, now let me hold you where you cannot be dropped. What broke you did not mean you were weak. It meant you were human, and God heals humans, not superheroes. He heals the honest, the open, the ones willing to admit they hurt. And as painful as the exposure was, it saved you from carrying hidden wounds into your future. Because God is not just interested in getting you past the pain, He is committed to making sure the pain doesn't follow you. The breaking was a mirror, and healing begins the moment you stop blaming the mirror and start addressing what it revealed. Sometimes God doesn't just heal you while keeping everything the same. Sometimes He heals you by removing what hurt you. And that's the part that confuses us, because we want restoration without subtraction. We want God to fix us and keep the relationship, fix us and keep the access, fix us and keep the familiarity. But God knows you cannot be rebuilt while standing in the same environment that broke you. So He removes what damaged you, not because He is cruel, but because He is committed to your healing. What hurt you had a role, but it did not have a future. And God, who sees the end from the beginning, knows that if it stays, it will interrupt the rebuilding process. You keep asking God to heal you, but you're still holding on to what wounded you. You keep praying for peace, but you keep entertaining chaos. You keep asking for wholeness, but you keep reopening the wound. And God says, I cannot rebuild you while the wrecking ball is still in the room. Removal feels like loss, but it is often protection in disguise. God is not punishing you by taking things away. He is preserving you by clearing space. You think you lost something valuable, but God saw something dangerous. You think you lost love, but God saw manipulation. You think you lost connection, but God saw control. And God will always choose your future over your feelings. Sometimes God removes people because they only knew the broken version of you and would resist the healed one. They were comfortable with your silence, comfortable with your overgiving, comfortable with your lack of boundaries. But the version God is rebuilding has a voice, has standards, has discernment, and not everyone can handle the upgraded you. So God removes them before they sabotage what He is rebuilding. You wonder why it had to end the way it did. Why? There was no closure, no explanation, no apology. But God knew that if you had closure, you would keep the door cracked open. And a cracked door still lets the draft in. So he shut it completely, not to hurt you, but to heal you without interruption. Because healing requires separation, and rebuilding requires distance from what caused the collapse. God removes what hurt you so you stop confusing pain with purpose. Some of what you fought to keep was never meant to stay. It was a season, not a sentence. It was a lesson, not a lifetime. And if it hadn't left, you would have kept shrinking to fit a space God was trying to grow you out of. Sometimes what hurts the most to lose is what was holding you back the longest. In the rebuilding process, God replaces what he removes, but he does not replace it with the same thing in a different package. He replaces it with something healthier, stronger, and more aligned with who you are becoming. But replacement doesn't happen until removal is complete. You can't receive new wine while clinging to old skins. You can't embrace new foundations while standing in old ruins. God removes what hurt you so your healing is not conditional, so your joy is not borrowed, so your peace is not dependent on someone else's behavior. He wants you whole even if nobody comes back. He wants you strong even if nobody apologizes. He wants you healed even if the story never makes sense. Because the goal is not reconciliation with what broke you, the goal is restoration of who you are. And when God finishes removing what hurt you, he begins rebuilding what helps you. He rebuilds your identity, your confidence, your trust in him. He rebuilds your discernment so you don't call red flags romance. He rebuilds your heart so it can love again without bleeding. And one day you will look back and realize that what you thought was abandonment was actually God creating the space you needed to become whole again. Just because something broke does not mean the assignment was canceled. The pain may have interrupted your progress, but it did not interrupt God's plan. People walked away, trust was shattered, and confidence was shaken, yet heaven never withdrew the calling. The breaking touched your emotions, but it never touched your purpose. What God placed on your life cannot be removed by human failure, betrayal, or rejection. You assume that because you were wounded, you were disqualified. You assume that because you fell apart, you fell out of favor. But calling is not fragile. It survives storms, mistakes, and heartbreak. If calling could be destroyed by pain, no one would ever finish what God started. The enemy attacks what carries destiny, not what is insignificant. The very fact that you were targeted is evidence that something valuable is still on your life. The breaking made you question yourself, not God's intention. It made you doubt your worth, not your assignment. You confused injury with invalidation. But God never said your purpose depended on people staying, loving correctly, or treating you fairly. Your calling was established before they arrived, and it will remain after they leave. People may walk out, but purpose stays. God allows breaking seasons because they mature the calling. They strip away pride, dependence on approval, and the need to be seen. They refine motives. They deepen compassion. They teach you how to carry authority without arrogance and influence without insecurity. You didn't lose your calling in the breaking. You learned how to carry it with humility and depth. Some assignments cannot be trusted to an unbroken heart. You needed empathy before impact. You needed wisdom before visibility. You needed discernment before access. And the breaking slowed you down long enough for God to develop what success would have destroyed if it came too early. Delay was not denial, it was development. The enemy wanted the pain to make you quit, but God used it to make you rooted. What you went through didn't disqualify you, it qualified you for a deeper level of ministry, leadership, and purpose. You now speak with authority because you have survived what could have silenced you. You now walk with strength because you stood in places where you almost collapsed. You thought God would replace you because you were broken, but God doesn't discard what he calls. He restores it. He reinforces it. He reshapes it. And when he sends you back, he sends you wiser, not wounded, stronger, not bitter, focused, not fragile. The breaking changed how you move, but it did not change where you are going. It altered your pace, but not your destination. God is still committed to finishing what he started in you. The assignment is still active. The calling is still valid. Heaven did not change its mind about you. And when you step into the next season, you will realize that the pain did not detour your purpose. It refined it, strengthened it, and positioned you to fulfill it with clarity, courage, and power that could only come from surviving the breaking. God never wastes pain. What you thought was damage, God calls material. What you thought was loss, God calls supply. The very thing that hurt you is the thing God starts shaping into purpose. He doesn't ignore the pain, He repurposes it. He takes what tried to destroy you and uses it to develop you. Because in God's hands, nothing is meaningless, not even the tears you cried alone. You wanted the pain removed, but God wanted it redeemed. Because removal erases the memory, but redemption gives it meaning. If God only took the pain away, you would forget the lesson. But when He turns pain into purpose, it becomes wisdom, authority, and testimony. The hurt becomes a teacher. The betrayal becomes discernment. The rejection becomes direction, and suddenly what once broke you starts building others. God uses pain as raw material because pain breaks you open. It exposes your heart, it humbles your spirit, it strips away illusions and forces you to see clearly. Comfort rarely changes people, but pain transforms them. And God, who is more committed to your transformation than your convenience, uses the pressure to shape you into someone who can carry more than you ever imagined. The pain taught you what to value and what to release. It taught you the cost of ignoring red flags. It taught you the danger of overgiving. It taught you that love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And God takes those lessons and weaves them into your purpose, so you don't just survive, you instruct. You don't just endure, you empower. You don't just heal, you help others heal. Your pain gave you a language that books couldn't teach you. It gave you compassion that theory couldn't produce. You can now recognize brokenness without being told. You can now sit with hurting people without judgment. You can now speak hope without sounding hollow, because you've been there. And God uses that credibility. He uses that depth. He uses that understanding. What hurt you sharpened your spiritual vision. You see differently now. You hear differently now. You pray differently now. You no longer beg for what God is trying to protect you from. You no longer chase what costs you peace. Pain matured your faith. It moved you from shallow belief to rooted trust. And God uses that kind of faith to move mountains, not just moments. The enemy intended the pain to make you bitter, but God turned it into intercession. The enemy wanted you silent, but God gave you a voice. The enemy wanted you isolated, but God positioned you to reach people who feel unseen and unheard. Your wounds became windows through which others can see God's grace at work. God takes the rawest parts of your story and builds something beautiful out of them. He doesn't ask you to forget where you've been. He asks you to let Him use it. Because the pain you survived is proof that God carried you. And the strength you gained is evidence that you were never abandoned. The pain did not disqualify you, it designed you. It shaped your calling. It refined your message. It prepared you to stand in places you would have collapsed before. And as God continues rebuilding you, He is turning every tear, every scar, every sleepless night into purpose that will bless lives you haven't even met yet. You keep asking yourself what you did wrong, because pain has a way of making you feel guilty for surviving it. When something breaks you, the first thought is that you must be paying for a mistake, a decision, a weakness. But hear this clearly, you are not being punished, you are being prepared. Punishment drains you, but preparation develops you. Punishment pushes you away, but preparation pulls you closer. And everything God is doing in this season has your future in mind, not your failure. If this were punishment, God would have left you where you fell. He would have withdrawn His presence, His voice, His guidance. But instead, He stayed. He kept speaking. He kept sustaining you when you didn't have the strength to sustain yourself. That alone is proof that this is preparation. God does not invest this much attention into someone He plans to discard. He prepares what He intends to use. Preparation feels harsh because it confronts areas comfort never touched. God is strengthening muscles you never had to use before. He is building endurance, patience, discernment, and spiritual depth, and none of that develops in ease. You are learning how to stand without support, how to trust without guarantees, how to obey without understanding. Those are not punishment lessons, those are leadership lessons. You are being prepared for spaces where emotional dependency would have destroyed you. You are being prepared for influence where insecurity would have sabotaged you. You are being prepared for responsibility where immaturity would have cost you everything. God is training you in private so you don't embarrass yourself in public. He is teaching you how to carry weight without breaking under it. The enemy wants you to believe this pain is God's anger because shame keeps you small. But God's preparation always comes with grace. Even in the hard moments, there is provision. Even in the lonely moments, there is clarity. Even in the stretching, there is strength you didn't have before. You're not being crushed, you're being conditioned. Preparation also separates you. Not everyone can go where God is taking you, and not everyone can handle the version of you that is emerging. So God allows distance not because you're unworthy, but because you're growing. You're outgrowing conversations, environments, and patterns that once felt normal. That discomfort is not rejection, it's elevation. You're learning to hear God without noise. You're learning to move without validation. You're learning to obey even when it costs you emotionally. These are not survival skills, these are kingdom skills. God is preparing you to walk by faith and not by familiarity. And that kind of preparation feels like loss before it feels like power. You thought preparation would look like doors opening, but sometimes it looks like doors closing, so you don't walk into rooms you're not ready to handle. Sometimes it looks like waiting so impatience doesn't ruin what timing is protecting. Sometimes it looks like silence so your dependence shifts from people to God. God is not delaying you, He is aligning you. Every test you're facing is strengthening a future you cannot see yet. Every tear is watering something that will grow later. Every moment you chose not to quit is building resilience that will sustain you when pressure increases. God prepares you in proportion to where He's taking you. And if the preparation is intense, it's because the assignment is heavy. You are not being corrected for the past, you are being equipped for the future. This season is not about what you did, it's about what you're going to carry. God is making sure you don't arrive empty, shallow, or unguarded. He is preparing you to walk into the next chapter whole, wise, and anchored in Him. And one day you will look back and realize that what felt like punishment was actually God loving you enough to prepare you for a level of purpose, peace, and strength you could not have handled. Before this season began, God does not rebuild you. It'll look like who you were before the pain. He rebuilds you to withstand what's coming next. You may miss the old version of yourself, the softer one, the more trusting one, the one who gave without hesitation, but that version could not survive the weight of the future God has planned. So God doesn't restore you to the same condition. He rebuilds you stronger. Not harder, not colder, but wiser, anchored, and more secure in Him. The old you loved deeply but lacked boundaries. The old you believed easily but discerned slowly. The old you gave access before people proved character. And while that version was sincere, it was also vulnerable in ways that caused repeated wounds. God honors your heart, but He strengthens your structure. He doesn't want you brittle where you should be fortified. So He rebuilds your emotional framework, your spiritual resolve, and your sense of identity. Strength doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer control you. Strength doesn't mean you stop loving. It means love no longer costs you your peace. God rebuilds you with balance. You still care, but you don't collapse. You still give, but you don't bleed. You still trust, but you verify. That's not damage, that's development. The rebuilding process changes how you respond. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once shattered you now alerts you. You don't ignore red flags anymore because pain taught you the price of silence. You don't chase closure because healing taught you contentment. You don't beg to be chosen because rebuilding taught you self-worth. Strength shows up quietly in how you walk away without explaining and how you stay without losing yourself. God rebuilds you stronger by rooting you deeper in Him. Before, your stability may have been tied to people, routines, or outcomes. Now your foundation is faith. And faith doesn't crack when circumstances shift. Faith doesn't panic when plans fall apart. Faith doesn't collapse when relationships change. You are stronger because your strength is no longer borrowed. You notice the difference when pressure comes. Before, pressure broke you down. Now it reveals you. It reveals patience, clarity, and restraint. It reveals maturity. You don't react the same way because you're not built the same way. God reinforced you in places no one sees, so when storms come, you don't fall apart publicly. Strength also looks like knowing when to rest. The old you tried to prove value by overworking, overgiving, and overcommitting. The rebuilt you understands that rest is not weakness, it's wisdom. You no longer exhaust yourself to earn what God freely gives. You protect your peace because you know how expensive it was to rebuild it. God rebuilds you stronger so your future isn't fragile. He prepares you for influence without ego, for blessing without burnout, for love without loss of self. The strength he gives you is not loud, but it is lasting. It's the kind of strength that stays calm in chaos, focused in confusion, and faithful in uncertainty. You may feel different, but different doesn't mean damage. It means developed. It means refined. It means rebuilt with intention. God didn't take you through the breaking to return you to the same condition. He took you through it to upgrade your capacity. And as you move forward, you carry a strength that doesn't need validation, doesn't fear loss, and doesn't crumble under pressure. You are not who you used to be, and that's the evidence of God's work. He rebuilt you with stronger faith, clearer vision, and a heart that knows how to love without losing itself. And this version of you can stand in places the old you could not survive. Restoration does not begin with retaliation, it begins with release. The moment you choose revenge, you hand your healing over to the person who hurt you. You let their actions continue to control your emotions, your decisions, and your peace. God cannot rebuild you while your hands are clenched in anger. Rebuilding requires surrender. Surrender of the need to get even. Surrender of the desire to be understood by people who already chose to misunderstand you. Revenge feels powerful, but it is actually exhausting. It keeps you tied to the pain, replaying the moment, rehearsing what you should have said, imagining how they should suffer. And while you're reliving it, your healing is on pause. God is not asking you to pretend it didn't hurt. He is asking you to stop letting the hurt dictate your future. Surrender is not saying what they did was right. It is saying you refuse to let what they did define you. It is trusting God with justice because you understand that His timing is cleaner than your anger. When you surrender, you are not losing control. You are transferring it to someone who sees the whole picture. God can handle what you cannot fix. Revenge focuses on them. Surrender refocuses you. It turns your attention back to your heart, your healing, your calling. You cannot rebuild while watching someone else's downfall. You rebuild by watching God's hand at work in you. Every time you resist the urge to retaliate, you create space for peace to grow. Every time you release bitterness, you strengthen your spirit. Surrender is often quiet. There is no dramatic moment, no announcement, no closure conversation. It happens in prayer when you say, God, I'm tired of carrying this. It happens when you stop checking their life to see if they're suffering. It happens when their name no longer controls your mood. That is restoration taking root. God rebuilds you when you lay down the weapons you were never meant to carry. Bitterness, resentment, and vengeance are too heavy for a healed heart. They weigh down your faith and slow your progress. God wants your hands free so He can place something new in them. But you cannot receive with fists full of anger. Surrender also protects you from becoming what hurt you. Revenge makes you hard. Surrender keeps you whole. God doesn't just want to fix the damage, He wants to preserve your heart. Because if you win the argument but lose your character, the pain still wins. Restoration is about who you become, not who you defeat. When you surrender, God takes over the rebuilding process completely. He heals what you couldn't reach. He restores what you thought was gone forever. He gives you peace that doesn't depend on apologies. He gives you closure without conversations. He gives you freedom without explanations. Revenge says they will pay. Surrender says I will heal. Revenge keeps you in yesterday. Surrender moves you into tomorrow. And when you choose surrender, you step out of the cycle of pain and into the process of restoration God designed for you. God cannot rebuild a heart that is guarding its anger, but He will always rebuild a heart that is willing to let go, trust Him, and move forward whole again.